But if the Holy Spirit moves with you and you want to share a prayer, that's something you maybe, we had some people compose some prayers, that's just how they felt comfortable. We'd love to hear them because they were just so beautiful. And nothing I could have reproduced in a million years. So it was a great experience. So we're going to do an opening prayer. If there's anybody so feel moved to open up our Bible study, would anybody like to let me know, or would you? Okay, I will do it. Lord, I thank you for this group of men and women and children that will be with us on this 2019 Israel trip to the Holy Land. We ask that you bless all of us in our preparation, in seeing and living and breathing your word in the places that you've been. And we ask that you bless Pastor Bill in his preaching to us, and the people that will serve us while we're there, our tour guide, our bus driver, and the people in the hotels and restaurants, and others that we'll meet on this wonderful journey. In your precious name we pray.
Amen.
Amen. So what we're going to do, oh, you found it, awesome.
I got it.
So what we're going to do, we're going to just do a quick building community thing again. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. It is a blessing, and I feel like the relationships that I've developed from 2017 are still strong and still special. And so we're just going to do a quick thing where we're going to, I know we have a few new people that are here, but we're just going to go around, shake each other's hands, say shalom, and say your name. So everybody stands up and we're going to mingle.
All right.
Mingle? We're going to mingle. Say your name and say shalom. Shalom. Julie, shalom.
You mean you
Shalom.
Hi, shalom. 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 Yoo-hoo. Shalom, Warren.
Warren?
Oh, I'm Kim.
Kim, yeah.
Shalom.
Warren.
Shalom, Pastor Bill. Shalom,
All right, I'm Denise.
Shalom.
Yes. All right. Here we go.
Lauren?
Shalom, Denise.
Shalom. And my name's Perter.
Shalom.
Shalom. Right, we didn't even get to do shalom. I know we didn't. Shalom, I'm Kim.
Ma'am, is this going to be
So, if you, oh, sorry. So, if you forgot an envelope or you need another envelope, let me know. I have extras here, and we also have cards.
There's cards out. You're going to want good 3 or 4 cards today, each.
So, if you,
And, you know, if you're here with a spouse and you're going to share, you can have a note taker. But if you want to make your own, that's a good thing too, because sometimes it's, you know, more, it's writing is helpful, and you might pick up on some things that the other person didn't. So, but do we have enough cards out?
Yeah.
Is everybody good? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that prayer, Julie, and it's great to chat a little bit. I want to do something just really quick here. I know you don't know this perhaps by heart, but you kind of do. So one of the things, I didn't plan on doing this part,
we're just going to do it.
we're
It's just like when we're in Israel.
yeah,
Things will happen.
Things will happen. You got to roll it. So there are some spots that we are going to visit, in particular St. Anne's Church, which is in Jerusalem, which is really kind of the start of the day. The pools of Bethesda are there, which are listed in the Bible, and we'll get to talking about those. But St. Anne's Church is built there, and it has the most beautiful acoustics. that I've ever heard. And the trouble is that pretty much all Christian groups go in there, and what hymn do you think they sing?
Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace. And it's run by, I forget which Catholic order, but to give grace to that person, we're not going to sing Amazing Grace, because they've heard it 100 times every day. So we're going to sing Beautiful Savior. And so I will sing, you know it well enough to where if I lead you, but we're just going to sing that now, and then by that time maybe we'll even be able to sing some parts, or we'll see. So we can go in there and sing, and it's one of the highlights, believe it or not. It's one of the highlights of the trip for me. So, all right, so Beautiful Savior. Beautiful Savior, King of creation, Son of God and Son of Man, truly I love thee, truly I serve thee, light of my soul, my joy, my crown. Oh, it sounds even wonderful right here. Thanks be to God. We will, in the weeks, when we start getting together every week in January, we'll work on some songs, so we've got them ready to go by heart. The other one I want us to do is We're Marching in the Light of God.
How about Jerusalem, my happy home?
Oh, in Jerusalem, well, they
Old American.
play that on the bus when you come into Jerusalem.
Great.
So, all right, so day 4. Get your note cards out, and we're going to talk about the 3 places we're going to go. And please remember that we have designed this tour to go slow these first 2 days compared to what you usually do. What we're doing in 2 days, sometimes you do in 1. So the first thing, and this is a picture, by the way, from what we'll talk about the next time we get together, our boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. But this is a picture looking out towards Capernaum. You see the mount, that little mountain that looks like that. That's Mount Arbel. Some of us will have a chance to walk up there and then look down on the Sea of Galilee. But right along there is the trade route that comes in through the Sea of Galilee. And anyway, so that's what you're looking at off in the distance. So the first thing we're going to visit is Capernaum. It is known as Jesus' hometown. And this is just one picture of the excavated remains of the first century town of Capernaum. So these are excavations of the original city that was there in Jesus' day. Jesus walked those streets. So here's some things to think about with Capernaum. Yes, it's his hometown. And we're going to read some scripture here. So I'm going to jump over to my logos. And this is Matthew 4:11. And you know, if you can write some of these down. But on the map that was handed out today, on the back of that map is a list of all the occurrences of Capernaum in your New Testament. Okay? So that's here. It might be, I think it's in your folder.
Oh, I wrote
I
it.
know, this is,
Oh, these are new.
Two,
No,
yes.
so you missed those. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
is there anybody else that did not get the 2 pieces of paper too?
Yep.
I only got one piece. I got the
Okay,
couple.
we'll get you 2.
There's a map that's a duplicate. I forgot I gave it to you last time. But this one has all the places of Capernaum. So this is from Matthew 4:11, or Matthew 12, sorry, 4:12. Now when Jesus heard that John had been arrested, and I've got it up here for you just in case you want to see it. He withdrew into Galilee. So where was John? He was down, this was the Jerusalem area, but Jesus was in Nazareth, which we're going to visit, and he then goes to Capernaum. And if you see on your map that you've got here, Nazareth is to the west of what's listed as Magdala, but Capernaum is right near Magdala. So Nazareth is right to the west of Capernaum. So Nazareth was kind of Jesus' place of upbringing. But he went and lived where? In Capernaum, by the sea, in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali. Now, this is interesting because these folks are associated with the northern tribes. They're up in the north, which is the territory of the north. And so the mention of this in the Gospel of Matthew is kind of a way to pull in the northern tribes that disappeared. Because in Jesus' day, you've got Judea, which is the Jews. The word Jews is really Judeans. It's the same thing. And that's a southern tribe that went off into exile, came back. The northern tribes kind of disappear. But Matthew's mentioning that he went to Capernaum in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, kind of brings in that aspect. So that was spoken by the prophet Isaiah may be fulfilled. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light, and for those dwelling in the region and the shadow of death, on them light has dawned. So the other aspect of this is it brings in the Gentiles. You can do a commercial break.
I didn't know, but you're going to the bathroom. Okay. Sorry, we're doing a commercial break. Michelle Shiplets, one of her children's here, and so
Oh, nice.
they're leaving and they won't be coming back. So I'm gonna switch right here and we're gonna talk about travel protection insurance while Pastor Bill's saying, and we'll get back to the Bible study. So thank you for your patience. Sorry for this interruption, but I thought it was important since they're from Spokane area, I believe. So a couple just important business items is that your deadline for your full payment of the tour is December 1st. So you still have time to, if you want to do a little bit, but please have the full payment of the entire tour December 1st, because after December 1st, I forget what day it is, they start releasing our airline tickets and hotel rooms. So that's kind of the cutoff time. Yes?
Question, is it better to send a check, or are they gonna charge if you use a credit card like they did last time?
Great question, Melanie. The same is true. Your deposit, you did not receive a incurring fee, a 4% fee to do the $400 deposit with your credit card. But any other payments with a credit card, you will get a 4% processing fee. So you can do a check on, and I think maybe even your debit card, but I prefer to do my check. So to save you money, please write a check and mail it to Faith-Based Expeditions if you want to do that. If you want to use your credit card, it's okay with me, but you'll get a 4% fee. And that is very common with many tour companies. When I took Rick Steves this past summer, they did the same exact thing. They charge a processing fee if you use your credit card. Pastor Bill and I really encourage everybody here to have travel protection insurance. Okay, we'll come back to this. Commercial break is over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wow, that was,
One more question I've been reading more than once and hearing about, is cheaper to fly out of Vancouver. Where are we flying out of?
We're flying out of Seattle.
Oh, okay. It's quite they save a good couple $100, I guess, but.
I know that it's different for every tour that Russ does, and he finds the best flights.
Okay.
Yeah, and so one time I've flown up to Vancouver, and the other time we've flown the opposite direction, to New York or to the East Coast, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it happens both ways. Okay, great. So, this also brings in now the mention of the Gentiles. And so from that time, Jesus began to preach, saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So, Capernaum is where it all happens. That's really the main thing I want you to know at this point. The location is important. And then what are some things that happen there? I'm going to kind of just list some things. We're not going to read each one of these. But you'll want to spend some time and read Mark 1:21 through 31. So that's a good reference to write down. So if you do one card for Capernaum, that'd be one side. I should have coached you on this. Capernaum on one side, and then flip it over, and you've got Jesus' hometown, Matthew 4:12, Mark 1:21, and Matthew 8:14 through 17. These are some healings. And I think I want to have us look at, just to help you think about this. So in the beginning of Mark, we hear about this unclean spirit that comes in the synagogue of Capernaum. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of the synagogue that's there now, or the remains of the synagogue, and talk about that. But then right after that, he immediately leaves the synagogue and enters the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. I'm going to show you a picture of this actual house and tell you why we're very confident this was Peter, where Peter healed his mother-in-law. Simon lay ill with a fever. Simon's mother-in-law did, and they told him about her, so he went from the synagogue over to the house. Now, when I had read this all my life, I thought this was like, walking across, a long distance, but you can literally throw a rock from the synagogue to the house. So it's just like walked, 20, 30 yards from the synagogue to the house. So I'm gonna talk some more about that. But this is where he lifts his mother-in-law up, and then everybody's coming to him to be healed, because now he's starting to do things, and people of Capernaum and the surrounding area are coming and are wanting to know what's up with this Jesus guy. So some healings happen in Capernaum, really important. Now, here's an interesting thing, is in Matthew 11:20, I'll go back to here, and I think I've got it queued up. So if you were a resident of Capernaum and you're going to see this town, it's not that big of a town. It's a big enough town where, you pretty much knew everything that was going on. Think small town, like Sandy's mom grew up in Sunburst, Montana, and I went and visited that. I thought I moved from Phoenix to Southern California to the Bay Area and then to Lodi, which was probably about 50,000 people. I thought that was a small town, but Sunburst is a small town. So everybody knows everything about what's going on. Well, this is the kind of world that we're talking about. You would think with all those healings, what would all of Capernaum been like, oh yes, Jesus. Well, listen to this. Then Jesus began to denounce the cities where most of his mighty works had been done, because they did not repent. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! And we're going to check out Bethsaida the next time we have a session. For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I tell you, what would be more bearable in the day of judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you. And you, Capernaum, my hometown, will you be exalted to heaven? You'll be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. And then he goes on. So it has a little ironic sadness to it. And it is true, all these little towns didn't last much longer after Jesus. Mostly because of the Roman invasion. But anyway, so that's, when you think of Capernaum, those are some things I want you to think about. The other thing I want you to think about is, what do we typically say? Seeing is believing? Not always. There were a lot of people who saw Jesus do miracles and didn't necessarily believe. So there's some mystery about this, and thank goodness the good Lord is much more patient with us than with Capernaum.
So, Pastor Bill, do
please.
people actually have a Capernaum address now, or is it just a site?
It's just a site. Yeah, doesn't exist anymore. And I think I forget what we'll have. That'd be a great question. In fact, even you could write that on your card, like, was this ever inhabited after Jesus? And I think the answer is yes for a while. So here's a few pictures for you. So this is, they've built this facade over the top of this house. In Jesus' day, the way homes were built is with stone and mud, and then they would put, branches as the roof and leaves for the roof. So this is the place they believe to be Peter's mother-in-law's house. Now you can say, now how do they know? That's, and there are some sites when you go to the Holy Land, you just go, well, that's nice. But, but here's the interesting thing. So archaeologically, what they have excavated the inside of this house, and they've found Christian symbols and some things that said that, this was a Christian site, but now how do we know it was Peter and mother-in-law's house? Well, later on in the next, the house, which typically houses were not plastered, that'd be too expensive, it had been plastered and painted white, and little nooks were put for all kinds of candles. Now, what do you need in the first century if you're going to have a space to worship? Candles. And you paint the wall so that it reflects the light. So for some reason, first century people, or first, second century, they had taken out, they showed where there used to be a stove, but they had taken that out. That had been taken out. And this space had been transformed into kind of a gathering place. And so why would you decide to use this house as your gathering place? Well, most likely because there was some significance. The people knew that this was a special place. And so, in the degree of certainty about things, most archaeologists say, yeah, they can feel very confident in this site. So this is a picture of us standing in the synagogue of Capernaum. Now the interesting thing about this synagogue, isn't that a great group? Mm-hmm. I've lost some weight.
I've stayed the same.
Let's hope I'll be looking like that. Anyway, it's fine. Sorry, that was a stupid thing to say. Okay, sorry. So this is a 5th century synagogue. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, Jesus was 1st century, this is 5th century. So, what's the big deal? Why is this important? Because, one, it gives you, if you were to turn right from taking this picture, you'd look back this way, and you would then see where the city of Capernaum is. So it's right there. But they've excavated underneath this synagogue, and there is a basalt foundation, a black basalt foundation. And again, they're very confident that that there was a synagogue of the 1st century, and so then they built this one on top of that one because of the significance of it. And then there are also some really interesting, what do you call those things that are on the top of the columns?
Capitals?
What is it?
Capitals?
Oh, yeah, it might be it.
Gargoyles? Go ahead.
What?
Gargoyles?
No, yeah, no, it's the actual thing. It's more like the cap. It's for this capstone that holds up the wall. But anyway, they have some really interesting artwork, and this one you can see has a what? And you'll get to see this one. As a menorah. And what is a menorah symbol? What does that connect us to, you think?
Jews.
It's certainly Jewish, but what place? Where's the menorah?
The synagogue.
In this, not in the synagogue.
Oh, the temple.
Temple.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and this is a 1st century one. This isn't from the 5th century. And so there are a lot of scholars look at these and go, wow, this is tying the synagogue to the temple. Now, after the temple's destroyed in 70 AD, basically the part of Judaism that survives is the synagogue, is the church, the local church. That's what, to this day, Judaism is focused on. And the law, the reading of the Torah, and the scriptures. But a lot of scholars have wondered, were there even actually synagogues? There was a scholar that came up with this theory that synagogues were just houses where people gathered. Well, we've actually found actual synagogues, and we'll see one in Magdala, which we'll talk about the next time we get together. Anyway, so that's just a fun little note. So that was Capernaum. That's your card for Capernaum. And you can read some more and write some more notes. So when you get there, okay, boom, you'll have your note card memorized, and you'll know why we're there. Then the next 2 spots are real close to each other. But this is, or the next spot is, there's two kind of parts to it that are real close here. There's two churches, and this is called Tabgha, or Peter's Primacy. And this is, there's the events that are being celebrated. Let me put them up here for you. Tabgha means 7 springs, and at this location there were actually 7 springs. But it's also, there's a church there called the Church of Multiplication. What story does that remind you of? So this is the site that is believed to be the place where Jesus did the feeding of the 5,000. I forgot, I didn't get the rest of John in there last night when I was working, but Mark 6:30 through 42, and there's a parallel in John. That great story of the fishes and the loaves and the boy bringing. So this is the Church of the Multiplication. So now, how do we know this is the spot? Well, we don't know for sure, but this is something that I can kind of give you a little background on when it comes to these sites. And some history, and remind you of some of your church history, or how you may not even know some of this, which is fine. So I'll give you some new stuff, or some reminders, some old stuff. In 300s, 4th century, 300s, the Emperor Constantine becomes a Christian. He's a Roman emperor. He has this vision of the cross leading him forth in battle, which is problematic in and of itself. But nonetheless, the cross leading him into battle, and he becomes a Christian. It's interesting, he doesn't get baptized till before he was just going to die. And that was a kind of a misreading of baptism a little bit, but I guess maybe you don't want to sin after you get baptized, so you wait right till you die or something. But he becomes a Christian for all intensive purposes, and he especially led by his mother-in-law, I believe. Bob?
Yeah. 4-H's are in
the fellowship hall.
And she's got a key. She'll lock up herself.
Thank you.
Everything else is locked.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Have a great week, Bob.
Thank you.
So, his mother-in-law, I believe it is his mother-in-law, Anne, she is a very committed Christian, and she kind of gets the permission to go and investigate now that Christianity has become a thing. A lot of people think Constantine forced Christianity upon her. To say he made it the religion of the state is not really correct, but he de-legalized it. He legalized it, I should say. And then he supported it with money and finances and scripture writing and all kinds of things. And so during this time is when we start seeing some of the sites, like where Jesus was, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Church of the Nativity. And so St. Anne went, or St. should have been Anne went, and she went and found out and interviewed. The story, as the story goes, she went and interviewed all the people. Now, where was it that Jesus was born? And talked to the local people, and this is where we get some of these sites. So a lot of them. So what we hear is that in the 300s, already by the 300s, we have a diary of a pilgrim who went and did what you're doing, and wrote notes after she was done, and mentions this place as the place where she visited, where Jesus multiplied the loaves. So over history, then churches get built over these sites and whatnot. But one of the places we're going to be is known as the Church of the Multiplication, and the place where Jesus very possibly did the multiplication of the loaves. This is inside the church, and that rock underneath it is supposedly the place. Now, the cool thing is you see right here, this is a mosaic from the Byzantine period. Byzantine is the Eastern Roman Empire. So Christianity began, and it was in the West and the East, and the Byzantine Empire holds on for much longer until it's conquered by the Muslims. And but the Byzantines loved that tile work, that really cool tile work. And so this was uncovered and excavated more recently. They found this. And so that shows there was long time a tradition that this was a really important sacred place. And so this mosaic is from like the I don't know, 300s, 400s, I forget the exact, we'll have to ask our tour guide. But it's a beautiful mosaic, and it's a beautiful church as well. So, and they've got an altar over it and whatnot. Okay, so that's the first one. Now there's another church at this site we're going to see, and it is called Mensa Christi Church, which means table. And so why is this one the table when he did the feeding of the 5,000? Well, this is the one, and we'll look at this. After Jesus is raised from the dead, let me go over here and see if I've got it queued up. So that's the feeding of the 5,000. Here we go. So in the Gospel of John, when Jesus is raised from the dead and he starts to appear to his disciples, we hear this story in John 21:15. When they had finished, I want to go back before that. It starts at verse 1. I apologize. 21:1. After Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. This is important. That's another name for Galilee. That's all. We're going to stay in the town of Tiberias. And he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael, Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to him, I'm going fishing. So they're back up fishing. And the next time we get together, we're going to show you that they've discovered an actual fishing boat from the 1st century. And you get to see it. It's just the same size as what Jesus would have got in. No one thinks it's the actual boat. But the Sea of Galilee's going down, and it had been preserved in mud, so the oxygen didn't get to it. We'll tell you the story later. Okay, so, and they said, we will go with you, and they went out and went in the boat, and that night they caught nothing. And Jesus, just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know it was Jesus. So Jesus, they're out in the boat, Jesus is standing there. Children, do you have any fish? He says. Then they answered him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. Now notice this time they didn't, we've been fishing all night like they did at the beginning of his ministry. They just said, okay, we'll do it. This worked before. So they cast it. Now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. And maybe it's helpful to say that there's a wonderful restaurant called St. Peter's Fish that we're going to actually get to have a tilapia fish from the Sea of Galilee. It's really good. But it does have the head on it. That the disciple whom Jesus loved before said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put out his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out of the land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, and with fish laid out on it, and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. We might talk then, unpack, we don't have time today to unpack this as much. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. So where did this happen? Well, there's this is the place that is kind of commemorated and thought of, and certainly somewhere on the Sea of Galilee in the northern part. But that is what this place is first about, is that this is the place that Jesus had invited them to come and have breakfast. It's also called the Primacy of Peter. Now, why is that? Well, right after this is where Jesus kind of reinstates Peter. I don't know if you remember the story, but he says, Simon, do you love me more than these? And he says, yes. And he said, feed my lambs. And he says, Simon, do you love me? He says, yes, I do, Lord. And tend my sheep. Then a third time Simon. So 3 times he does this, and then commissions Peter. And so this is kind of held up as it's called the Primacy of Peter. The Catholic folks are very much focused on this because you can understand Peter is the first pope, and it goes down. So this is the popes, when they come to the Holy Land, they have the 2 times, like I think it was back in 2000, and then I forget when they came, but they come to this spot, because this is the spot where Peter, was started, and then on and on. Protestants we don't quite look at it with that that kind of significance. But anyway, so when you think about this next place we're going to go, when you see Mensa Christi Church or Peter's Primacy, that's what we're talking about. This is the site of the resurrection, and this is also the site of the feeding of the 5,000 and the multiplication of the loaves. So, and that's what we just looked at. Questions about any of that?
Is there any significance why Jesus would have, I mean, the fact that it was where the multiplication happened, is there a significance that that's where Jesus chose to make breakfast for the disciples?
Interesting. I don't know. But the churches are right there close by. And I always have gotten confused in my mind when I go there. Like, but that is intriguing.
I'll read about it.
Yeah. So we gotta look that up. So this is the rock inside the church. It's beautiful. And the church is made of these black basalt stones. Now, the multiplication, they know that there was a church there back in the Byzantine period. The black basalt church, it had gotten, when various invading folks come in, it's gotten destroyed. This I think, goes back to the 1930s. But the rock that they've celebrated, this place where he may have had the charcoal, So this is a chance to say, do we know for sure this is the spot? No. But there was a spot. There was a spot. And when we talk about the birth of Christ, when we go to the Church of the Nativity, do we know for sure this is it? No, we don't. But in a cave in Bethlehem, and the important thing is that there was a spot. And it's interesting, visiting these sites, it just grounds you. And now also you'll be able to go out of the church, and look out on the Sea of Galilee. And now when you read that story, you'll have a mental picture that you just can't get by looking at pictures of the Sea of Galilee. I hadn't planned to say this, but let me say this too. When you see the Sea of Galilee, just seeing it for me was an emotional experience. It's the lowest freshwater lake in the world. Dead Sea is the lowest lake. Sea of Galilee is the lowest freshwater lake. But it is just unique. It is, Sandy and I used to be up in Lake Tahoe. It's similar to the size of Lake Tahoe, but, Lake Tahoe's got all these huge mountains, but Sea of Galilee does have mountains, but it's different, and it just has it's just interesting. What I had envisioned it to look like wasn't what it looked like. So that's just kind of a cool thing. So when you get there, now you'll be remembering what that's about. We can. You didn't get this one? Okay. This one right here. Let's see. This one?
Yes.
Okay. One more. There you go. John 21 is the 15 through 19 is the primacy of Peter. I can put that. That's the kind of reinstatement of Peter as the
Why is it called a reinstatement?
Reinstatement is reinstatement because he had denied Jesus 3 times, and now he gets to say I love you 3 times, and we'll do some more unpacking of that when we're there. So that's sometimes why it's called reinstatement. But yeah, for me, it's not like he stopped being the disciple, but maybe his position, since he had kind of forfeited it, maybe by denying Jesus. I don't know. That might be why. But yeah. So for me, it's the resurrection appearance is the real significant one, and the commissioning of Peter, actually, and all the disciples. True. So yeah, great, Sonia. Good. Okay. Any other questions on that? Got 15 minutes? No, 10 minutes, because we have to finish the commercial on trip insurance and any other. All right. So you got your note cards on Tabgha, and then the Church of Mensa Christi Church. The last thing we're going to do on this day is go to the Church of the Mount of Beatitudes, and this is the only picture I have. And we will have a time to go inside the church, and it's worthy of a lot of pictures, but you'll be asked to be very discreet about that. Our brothers and sisters in the Catholic Church, these sites hold immense, and then Orthodox too, immense importance. And you'll see, at least the times I've been there, you'll see people around the altar inside the Church of the Beatitudes praying, weeping sometimes, you know, because this, you know, again, they build churches over sites, you know. That this is one of the very likely places that Jesus gives the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. So I'm going to do just a short teaching on the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, so that you've got some sense of that. What I hope to do is, I've asked, the nuns at this particular place are very kind of rigid. I don't know a kind way to say it. And so the guide is kind of like, you know, and I think that our Catholic brothers and sisters, because it's run by the Catholic Church, get a little bit more time maybe. But I've asked our guide to give us a place that we can kind of look out over the Sea of Galilee, and then we'll read the Sermon on the Mount, or parts of the Sermon on the Mount. So we'll have some time there. And again, our 2 trips before, the first trip I took and our first trip as a church, everybody said, oh, we just wish we had more time there. It's peaceful. It's beautiful. There's just something about it. It's really interesting. So we'll have some time in the church, but we'll also have some time to worship, to sing some songs, to hear scriptures about, you know, the Beatitudes. So let me just give you some stuff to put on your note card of the Mount of the Beatitudes. Yes, this is known as the place of the Sermon on the Mount, but of course it could be any of these big hills that were up above the Sea of Galilee. We know it had to be there somewhere. And the Sermon on the Mount is in Matthew 5:1 through the end of chapter 7, which is 7:29. Now there is a parallel to this sermon in Luke. I didn't put the passage up here. I'm sure you can look it up and find it. But in Luke, it's not on a mount. It's on the plain. Which very much each of the gospel writers, the location tells you what they see happening in that event. Now, some people get caught up, well, did he really do it on the mount or on the plain? Well, I can tell you as a preacher, I preach the same sermon more than once. Right? So I think Jesus probably had a similar content in a lot of sermons, in a lot of messages. Maybe he gave it in a number of different places, some of the same teaching. But each of the gospel writers, Matthew and Luke, put it in where they put it for reasons. In Luke, it's like everybody's been put on the same plane, Jew, Gentile. You know, it's really beautiful. Now in Matthew, let's look at that. Matthew is a very Jewish gospel. More than all of the gospels work hard to root the story in the Old Testament. But Matthew often has this, he'll say, this happened to fulfill that. This happened to fulfill this from the Old Testament. This happened to... So we know Matthew's audience is very likely made up of a lot of Jewish people who know the story, who, you know... And so when Jewish people would think of a religious figure going up on a mountain, what figure would they think of? Moses, right. So, and I actually talked about this, I think, this morning in my class. But, so let's review what happened with Moses. Moses went up on Mount Sinai. Now that's a real mountain. This is a kind of, mountains in the Holy Land are, you know, mountains for us in the, you know, who've grown up in the western United States with the Sierras and the Olympics and the Cascades, you know, mountains. So, but nonetheless, Moses goes up on the mountain and God verbally gives him the 10 Commandments and the law, and Moses goes down and brings it, and he has this glow on his face, and all this happens. Okay, now, in Matthew 5, Jesus goes up on the mountain. But he goes up, but does he go up by himself? Does he go up by himself? Actually, let's take a look. It's his disciples. Let's see if we got this here. Yes, right here. So, let's go to Matthew 5:1. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain. Remember, you can just imagine down at Capernaum in these along the Sea of Galilee. He's doing all these miracles. Everybody's coming to see what's going on and to maybe find healing themselves or whatever. He went up the mountain. Which mountain? We don't know exactly. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, so, who's the audience? The disciples.
But more than just the 12, weren't there?
Correct. Yes, Sonia, that's really important. When you hear disciples, if you don't hear 12, there were lots of disciples. And there were women disciples. This is really important. So, so he goes up the mountain, and then he says these amazing Beatitudes, which have captured, our interest and attention. I've given you in this piece of paper, which is yours is double-sided, a thing on the back that says Beatitudes there, but then on the front side or the Capernaum side, I just want to read this quick. This is from Bob Smith's commentary. Let's see. Oh, no, Ted Peters quotes Bob Smith. So go to where it says the Beatitudes. Listen to Bob Smith, a professor of mine at my seminary's description of the Beatitudes, and really the whole of the Sermon on the Mount. The Beatitudes send shudders up the spine, fill the heart with a sense of dread, mark the line between sacred and the profane, warns my late Berkeley colleague Robert Smith. Jesus' Beatitudes are bolts of lightning splitting the skies. They crack open the heavens, astonish eye and ear, and carry with them the smell of burning ozone. They are ecstatic, inspired declarations trumpeted from the mouth of the revealer, and they are brimming with infinite grace. Liberation theologian Gustavo Gutierrez exhibits a similar exuberance. The Beatitudes of Matthew are the Magna Carta of the congregation, made up of the disciples of Jesus. The Beatitudes adorn life of the robust soul. Cool words to talk about the Sermon on the Mount, and in particular these Beatitudes. Now, so just a few things to kind of write down in your card, some interesting teaching. So, all right, why did I talk about Moses? Well, notice, in Moses' situation, he goes up by himself, and God speaks to Moses. Now we've got a similar mountain, or a similar concept. Divine things happen on mountains in the Old Testament. So Jesus goes up on a mountain. But wait, the disciples go with him. Now who is in line with Moses, do you think? Who would be a comparative?
The disciples.
The disciples. It's not Jesus who's like stepping into Moses. Whose shoes is Jesus stepping into? God's. Yes, right. And Jesus will actually, in the Sermon on the Mount, say, you've heard it said in the Leviticus, Moses, but I say to you, boy, this guy's taken some pretty big, this is pretty powerful. So the Beatitudes. Here's a fun little tidbit, and then we want to, finish up. So the word in Greek for beatitude or blessed, like blessed are the pure in heart, blessed, so that's beatitude. The word in Greek is makarios. Makarios. Now Jesus spoke Aramaic, but Matthew, the writer, is going to pick out a word to reflect what Jesus actually said. So he uses makarios. Now let's look at this word. This is really interesting. It means blessed. But in the Greek world, you've got Plato and Socrates and all these great philosophers. Righteousness was a big issue. Who are the righteous? How do you be righteous? What's going to happen to the righteous? And Plato said that the righteous are the people who live a righteous and just life, who strive for that on this life. And guess what happens to them when they die? They get to go to an island, a paradise. And guess what that island was called in Greek? Makarios. So why Matthew, as a writing in Greek, very much in the Hellenistic world, all of his hearers, although Jewish, no Greek backwards. This is a part of their life. The Greeks were, and Romans were amazing with how they got their language into the people. And you might say, well, I thought that all the people were illiterate. Well, most people could not write. But that doesn't mean most people couldn't read. We actually find marketplaces with graffiti written from the 1st century and on. I mean, if people couldn't read, you wouldn't have graffiti. I mean, not that that's an in-depth reading, but, you know, so we want to distinguish between those two. Now, so Matthew chooses this word that to be blessed, this island of paradise that the righteous get to go. So Dr. Peters, I quoted him here. I'll just read this last paragraph on this back here. Let's ponder this ourselves. For Plato, entrance to Makarios is gained by dying with a just soul and being resurrected on the island of Makarios. According to Matthew, who is quoting Jesus, entrance into Makarios is a gift of God. God offers a declaration of justice, which is bequeathed to the human soul. In both cases, it is the just soul that rises into Makarios. The difference is that for Plato, we create our own justness, while for Jesus, this justness is given to us as a gift of divine grace. This makes Jesus' amorphisms, beatitudes, be attitudes, not do attitudes. And so let's go back here to these blessed. So this isn't a, hey, we've got to do this. This is, when you're poor in spirit, you're blessed. Yours is the kingdom of heaven. When you mourn, you will be comforted. The blessed are the meek. So you see how this is a gift that he's giving? See how they're brimming full with grace? Well, we'll get to hear them again on the Mount of Beatitudes, the first day we're there.
Pastor Bill, aren't they also written on signs throughout the
They are. And there's gardens and everything. And so then we'll go back to our hotel. We'll have a lovely Mediterranean dinner in our hotel in Tiberias. And then, for those who would like, we have some special Israel. Israel's doing a lot in winemaking. This is John and Marilyn. I don't want to say we've had a few by then, but no. But we had a lovely wine tasting there, and it was a lot of fun. And so we'll get to do that. For those who want to, those who don't, and we're looking even at thinking about some child care for the younger kids. This type of thing. So, yeah. Or maybe some of our older daughters can be together and take care of the younger kids. No, anyway, no, we're looking into that. We're investigating. Okay, so that's day 4. Any other questions or thoughts? Excited? That gets you excited? Cool. Okay, I know we're at time, but we started 5 minutes late, so let's finish up on what you're talking about.
Sure. I just had this idea during this thing because we're going to get several different cards. I put mine on the card, I put day 4.
Nice.
If you want to put the date, it's going to be Thursday, March 28th is day 4. Because you're going to have several different cards. You might want to keep them separate so you know what they are.
Give us the date again.
It's going to be Thursday, March 28th is day 4.
Cool.
And before I get back into the travel protection insurance, our next meeting will be January 6th. Nothing in November and December. So our next meeting will be January 6th.
And then we start meeting each week, basically.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
We'll meet 3 times in January, 3 times in February, and then 1 time in March.
All right.
Okay. So, travel protection insurance, Pastor Bill and I really recommend that everyone on the tour has travel protection insurance. Not this last time in May, the owner of Faith-Based Expeditions, Russ Goodman, when he came in 2016, he kind of gave some horror stories of people that did not get travel protection insurance. And it's not only a protection of your investment in case something happens to you before we leave, whether it's health or an accident, or, you can find all the fine print in this. I printed it out for you in your packets. If you go to the second, excuse me, not the second, but it's this page where it says 360 degrees group. This is our insurance. That's with faith-based expeditions. So, what I want to say about that is when I travel with my mother, I pay more because my mom is older. When you're younger, you don't pay as much for travel protection insurance. So those who may be older, you might look at this price, and this is a good price, $397. I don't have a page number, but it's 360.
Oh, got it.
Percentage. So, but you are welcome to go search for other travel protection insurance if you wish. We encourage you to go with faith-based because they really took care of us. We had a few people on the 2017 tour that needed some medical attention, and it was really smooth, and they provide support in helping people fill out the paperwork and things like that. I know that Pastor Bill's talked to the two families that have children. There's a special rate for families, so you don't have to pay $400 for each person. So it's a really good price. As with any travel protection insurance, there's a lot of fine print. And if you want to look through those to make sure this is the right plan for you, please feel free to read through that. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask me. I'll probably defer to Russ Goodman, and he can ask further. I would say that it's just a good peace of mind. And I don't buy travel protection insurance while I'm in the States, when I go to visit family in Arizona or California. But then again, when I have my mother, yes, because she's at an age that anything can happen. But when I travel internationally, I do, because I don't want to lose all my savings that I've worked so hard through all the years, go up and smoke just to get back home. So you can see here that they have emergency medical and dental expenses. They have, if you need evacuation, they have that. If there's a trip delay, which we didn't have any problems, just anything that just might be out of the ordinary. But again, there's conditions that have to be met, and it's very specific, and if you want to take a look at that, feel free to do that. So we encourage everybody.
Where is the price, Julie? I don't see it anywhere.
In your brochure.
In the brochure.
Oh, in this one, okay.
Yeah.
So you look at the back page here, this is a group plan, so regardless of your age, we all pay the same price.
Yeah.
$397. Now, some of you that may be younger, you might be able to get us cost saving with something else. But the thing is that our church, Pastor Bill, or myself probably will not be able to help you with it. So if you go with a different plan, it's going to be on you
And
figuring it out.
And let me also just say that even with this plan, you know, like if you had to go to the emergency room, then you have to pay with a credit card and you get reimbursed. That's the way this works. So, and then the last thing I just want to reiterate with Julie, we have looked into, we could get trip insurance as a group from our insurance company as a church, but they don't offer pre-trip insurance. So if something happens to you before the trip and you can't go, I mean, and it can be loss of job, it can be medical, like with this scholarship for a young person, if they were to get a job and the employer said you cannot go, if you know that was verified, then that insurance would come into play. So it's pretty robust as far as if something happens beforehand, and that's the big part of the expense. Certainly it's there, which you've got to have if you need to get home for whatever reason. So it is really great peace of mind. We just really want you to have some kind of trip insurance for sure. So yeah, just need to do it. I wish it wasn't, even though it actually is a good price. I mean, because you've done trip insurance through some of your trips, and so anyway. Okay.
There is one thing here. It says, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I've got this right. Something about you have to do it before you pay your last payment.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So you need to buy that when you buy. when you do your final payment in December.
Got it, okay.
So, but we can do it earlier and.
Yes,
Yes,
Separate check to someplace.
that part I don't remember.
you don't necessarily have to do a separate check.
Okay.
You can just make it, let's say you wanna pay, $4,000, you can just write your check, whatever the balance is.
Yeah, yeah, then you just add it to, I don't think you have to make a separate
No, you
payment.
don't, okay.
Yep.
So it's somewhere here in this group 360 or something, I'll figure it out.
I think it's, if you pay on, I think if you go online or you look in the brochure, it tells you, but call us, let us know, and if there's any confusion about it. Okay.
I have a question, what is the site of where you're teaching that, because we missed one, so.
Under the
I-
website.
Julie's gonna remind me to send you all an email,
Okay,
and I will have the link for it in there, yeah,
okay, thank
yeah.
you.
Yep.
It's easy though, YouTube, and then Silverdale Lutheran, and then Pastor Bill's teaching.
Yeah, so it's PB''S, if you go to YouTube, PB''S teaching, and that's where all of our classes